When you're elected president, arguably your most important stretch of the presidency is your first 100 days. Upon
I
election,
thought you said you were
the
going.
president typically starts enacting whatever agenda they campaigned on, whatever agenda they prepped for their potentially winning the presidency. And for these first 100 days, they go about every which way in enacting this agenda. This is when the country is most tuned in to politics because it's the aftermath of the election. There's a new face. We're no longer bored of the same blithering idiot that was in the White House for the 4 years before. This is even true with Joe Biden. I have been on record as saying that forget the first 100 days. The first 2 years of Biden's presidency was probably the best federal governance we have seen in, I don't know, maybe since like Lyndon B. Johnson. Definitely the best governance that I had ever seen. But eventually, he grew old, he developed dementia, and he became the premier Israel dick rider. Donald Trump has been in office for about 100 days. I think his 100 days in office was actually last week, but well, whatever. We're being pedantic here. Now, Donald Trump talked a lot of shit on the campaign trail about the economy, about immigration, about Hannibal Lecter, about Arnold Palmer's penis, and the expectation was that he would come into the White House, enact all this legislation, sign all these executive orders, and then next thing you know, prices would be down, housing costs would be down, the genocide in Gaza would have been ceased along with the war in Ukraine, and yet none of that has happened. All of the major polling outlets are gathering information on public opinion. We looked at one last week from Reuters and Ipsos that polled people's perception of Donald Trump's approval, or that gauged people's approval of Donald Trump overall and on certain issues. But I've stumbled upon a new set of polls from Fox News. And this isn't just Fox News reporting on the findings of the Reuters and Ipsos poll. This is Fox News's own poll that found the majority of Americans disapprove of and are concerned with the direction that the country is heading in. Why is this important? This is important because this is a conservative media outlet going out and conducting a poll that is potentially biased. I understand that there are biases in every major media company, but the Fox News bias is particularly conservative. And I looked at this before. And even though these polls are potentially biased in the way that people respond to like immigration, for example, a lot of people across the country are concerned about their future. They're concerned about what the next 3 years hold for us. As President Donald Trump nears the 100th day of his second term, a Fox News survey finds voters pleased with the job he is doing on border security, but displeased on most other issues, including inflation. Inflation and the economy is massive, not only because Donald Trump campaigned heavily on it, but because these things directly impact the 99%. These types of issues have repercussions for working class people. If inflation keeps going up, if the cost of living keeps going up while wages stay stagnant, people are going to be worse off. And that is going to reflect in their sentiment towards the president. One of the reasons why Kamala Harris lost, and there's a whole litany of reasons, people felt better under Donald Trump than they did under Joe Biden. Part of this is vibes. Part of this is looking back to pre-COVID. Things were obviously considerably different, but there's a portion of that that falls on the Democrats' messaging, because instead of recognizing that the price of goods has gone up and talking about capping price gouging, which Kamala Harris did for a couple of weeks, ironically enough, they kept saying that inflation is down, inflation is down. No one gives a shit if inflation is at normal levels when the price of goods are still at like 10, 20, 30-year peaks. You cannot argue with somebody's perception of reality. Whatever people believe their life is, that's what they are going to think their life is. Your job as a politician, and this is why Bernie Sanders and AOC are so effective, is to recognize what people are saying to you, understanding and agreeing with them that the system is fucked, and trying to not necessarily convince them, but explain your agenda to them and what exactly you will do if you are elected to public office. Bernie Sanders is very blunt about this. Higher minimum wages, higher minimum wage, higher taxes on the wealthy, healthcare reform, paid time off mandated by law, universal free childcare. People hear these and they're like, this would benefit me. A higher minimum wage would benefit me if I'm living in a red state, or even if you work like a professional, like a quote unquote professional job. The minimum wage goes up. Your wages are probably going to go up as well because your company wants to retain you. Why go do, in some instances, easier work? Like, you can go and do easier work for the same pay. Like, it's easier to go work at Target than it is to work in a factory or a fucking steel mill if the wages are similar, right? If you're getting paid $16 to work at the steel mill, and Target's paying you $15 to stock shelves, you're going to go fucking stock shelves. Trump receives his best mark on border security as 55% approves. That's the only issue where his ratings are in positive territory. This is just due to the fascist view that a lot of people have on immigration that they've developed because both parties talk about immigration in the same way. There's no delineation between the Republican and the establishment Democrat view on immigration. So this is just the public believing that the immigration system is fucked, which it is, but that the only way to fix it is by conducting mass deportations and not having a more robust processing system where you have more judges, more agents, more caseworkers doing their best to expedite these people's applications towards citizenship. On immigration, a record high of 47% approve of Trump, 48% disapprove, while a new low of 38% approve on the economy, 56% disapprove. His worst ratings are on inflation, 33% approval to 59% disapproval, followed by tariffs, 33% to 58%, foreign policy, 40% to 54%, taxes, 38% to 53%, and guns, 41% to 44%. I'm not surprised by the disapproval on the economy and on inflation because shit is still the same, pal. Shit is still the same. You may be able to brainwash your supporters, but that's only like 20 to 30% of the population. Like out of 100 people, 70 to 80% of them are going to realize that, oh my God, it's almost fucking May. Donald Trump has been president for 3 months. Not only has nothing happened economically, but literally every institution and everybody who took Econ 101 recognizes that the economy is only going to get worse if this tariff plan is enacted. You cannot outrun the truth. You cannot hide from the truth. You can say that tariffs are going to make us rich all you want, but you are speaking to the 20 to 30% of voters who voted for you. You're not speaking to the greater American population. I'm surprised that foreign policy is this disfavorable. I think I remember early on in his presidency, there was a larger portion of people who were like, oh yeah, things are great in the Middle East. Things are great in the Ukraine. I mean, it wasn't like an overwhelming majority, but most people were kind of just agnostic to what was going on within foreign policy. So that's interesting. Taxes, people want higher taxes on the wealthy, man. Like this is it. They want to see the billionaires pay their fair share. They want to see corporations pay their fair share. They're sick and tired of hearing about how they paid more dollars in federal income tax than Amazon did. Some people do recognize that balancing the budget is a lot easier when you generate more revenue as opposed to when you only look to cut spending. I mean, dude, even Steve Bannon was like, and I talked about this on my last show. Even Steve Bannon was like, "Hey, we should like raise the taxes on people earning more than $1 million a year, like considerably." And he had the same explanation that I have when I tell people about why I think that we should return to a massive top marginal tax rate. Because if you're concerned about the debt, if you're concerned about, you know, that $36 trillion, generate more revenue. And you can generate more revenue off of taxing higher earners. I mean, I also advocate for, you'd be able to further fund these essential services like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. You'd be able to fund like infrastructure projects and things of that nature. But on the grounds of reducing the debt, I do agree with raising taxes as well. It's a solution that only has positive outcomes. This is just a if you're watching, this is just a visual of everything. Overall job performance is 44% approval. That's fucking insane. Like that is truly staggering to me. I spend a lot of time online. I've cut down on my time online considerably, but if you do spend a lot of time online, I encourage you to just like go outside, delete Twitter off your phone for 24 hours, because you will recognize that people are beginning to wake up to the shit that we are dealing with. Like, especially if you go on Twitter, it is just a right wing circle jerk. But you step outside and like you talk to people, and these people recognize that, hey, shit is potentially really fucked up. Overall approval of Trump's job performance comes in at 44%, down 5 points from his 49% approval in March. That's lower than the approval of Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and George W. Bush at their 100-day mark in their presidencies. It was 54, 62, and 63%, respectively. It's also 1 point lower compared to Trump's 45% approval at this point 8 years ago. Some 59% of voters are unhappy with how things are going in the country. That's an improvement since the end of former President Biden's term, 68% dissatisfied, but worse than 4 years ago at the beginning of Biden's term, 53% dissatisfied. It's also worse than the 100-day mark of Trump's first term, 53% dissatisfied. Since his inauguration in January, satisfaction among Democrats has turned to dissatisfaction, and vice versa among Republicans. Dissatisfaction remains steady among independents. I'm not surprised about obviously not surprised about the Democrats, nor am I necessarily surprised about the independents. But when I see more and more Republicans turning on Trump, I have two schools of thought. My first is that why the fuck are you still a Republican? Like, if you voted for Trump thrice and you are just now recognizing how disastrous he is, like, what are the mental gymnastics that you have to do that you did over the last 8 years to convince yourself of that? But on the other hand, I'm glad that these people are waking up and recognizing that the president can actually make your life considerably fucking worse. There's a lot of nihilism. There's a lot of people who are checked out from electoral politics because of their perception and their understanding that the president has little to no power to fundamentally alter your life. And I understand why they feel that way. But it's not so much that the president is incapable of doing so. It's that many of the presidents since Ronald Reagan have actively tried to do as little as possible because they are all staunch neoliberal capitalist warmongers. Everybody from Bill Clinton to Barack Obama, and for even, in the final 2 years of Joe Biden, they just had no interest in helping the working class. That's the unfortunate reality. And people who are not tapped into politics, people who do not have class consciousness, are less likely to elect somebody like Bernie Sanders twice, who is someone who would have tremendous impact on people's well-being, even if none of his legislation passed. I believe that Bernie Sanders would be favorably viewed because the reason why his shit doesn't pass is because the freaks in Congress shut it down. And what happens when Congress, the Senate, and the House consistently strike down legislation? Their approval fucking tanks. We see this with government shutdowns, for example. Shit. When the government shuts down, and this was why people, myself included, were mad at Chuck Schumer for not forcing the government to shut down. People recognize that the party that's in power is at fault. In order to avoid a government shutdown, you got to be going out there, shaking hands and kissing babies, trying to convince your constituents, the people in Congress, to vote for your bill. You have to explain to them how this is going to be beneficial to your local community. Obviously, Democrats are the only ones that would even produce anything beneficial, but the point still stands. Voters remain gloomy about the economy as 71% rate economic conditions negatively and 55% say it's going to get worse for their family. Both of these numbers are slight improvements compared to where they stood in December. Still, only 28% say it feels like things are getting better. And by a 22-point margin more, think Trump's policies are hurting rather than helping the country. 28% think that things are getting better. That statistic tells a lot. The majority of this country are either undecided or disapprove about the direction this country is heading in. And I would venture that a very small portion of them are undecided. But the 28% that are saying otherwise, that is likely Trump's base, who see immigrants getting deported and think that their life is going to be substantially improved. And the unfortunate reality is they are in for a very rude awakening. The article continues. Trump is underwater by a narrower 11-point margin when voters are asked what they expect from his policies in the long run. 40% say help versus 51% hurt. They're also less optimistic about the future than they were at the beginning of Trump's first term. Based on the first 100 days, 38% overall and 75% of Republicans say they feel encouraged about the next 4 years. In 2017, those numbers were 45 and 84%, respectively. It's tough being a two-term president when your first term was not overwhelmingly impressive, and that's what we're seeing with Donald Trump. While inflation remains a major worry, the 82% who say they are extremely or very concerned about high prices is the lowest since September 2021. This marks a decline from 89% in January and a high of 93% in July of 2022. Very valid, especially in those post-COVID years when we were getting ass fucked by multinational corporate conglomerates and no one was like, hey, maybe we should do a windfall profits tax. Well, except Bernie Sanders. Yeah, so the feelings on inflation are super valid, and I feel that is like that's pretty bipartisan. I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so just for all of you fellow nerds out there, the sample base of this is registered voters with a margin of error of 3 percentage points. However, I don't know the sample size of this. However, I would infer that the sample size is quite large considering how poorly Donald Trump is doing across the board. Like, if this were a small sample size, I think it could very easily be skewed amongst a Fox News viewer base. But these are on track with the Reuters Ipsos poll we looked at, which had 4,000 respondents, which is more than a large enough sample size. Another 8 in 10 voters are concerned about political divisions. 78%, well, about 7 in 10 feel the same about healthcare. 76% government spending. 73% and a recession. 72%. 2/3 or fewer are worried about immigration. 66%. Iran getting a nuclear bomb. 66%, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the stock market at 58%. Political divisions is really interesting because folks will say that we are a highly politicized nation. And to a degree, I would venture yes. I think there is a large division in regards to social issues, certain social issues, but significantly less when it comes to economic issues. Keep in mind, this is by design. The Republican Party exclusively talks about wedge issues. They talk about trans fencers. They talk about the one immigrant who commits a crime. And they beat these fucking stories to death because they have no chance of ever winning an economic debate. They have no chance of ever looking superior in an argument about economics because it's very simple. If I ask like probably 90% of these dipshits on TV, do you support a $15 minimum wage? They're going to say no because they're all wealthy assholes. They're all wealthy elites. I'll ask them, do you support single payer healthcare? They're probably going to say no. If I ask someone in Tuscaloosa or someone in Bell County, Kentucky, hey, what do you think about a $15 minimum wage? What do you think about single payer healthcare so you don't have to worry about paying a bill if your child gets sick and has to be hospitalized for, I don't know, bronchitis, RSV? They're going to say, "Yeah, I think that's great." The thought process behind the media is to keep people divided in order to prevent them from cultivating class consciousness, because a working class that is united would figuratively eat the rich. If we go back in time to the 40s, 50s, and 60s, there was high unionization rates. There was lower wealth inequality. People lived more comfortable and more fulfilling lives. You were able to have a family, a house, and a car on a single income. And largely, that is because of the economically populist policies implemented by FDR, maintained by Dwight Eisenhower and Harry Truman, and also Lyndon B. Johnson. Ronald Reagan comes along and fucks all of that up. Your job, outsourced. Even though outsourcing had been happening for, a couple of years before that, it really ratcheted up with Ronald Reagan. Union busting was tremendously high with Ronald Reagan. I mean, this guy disbanded an entire fucking union of air traffic controllers because they went on strike. The wealth inequality skyrocketed. He allowed stock buybacks, which allows companies to just overvalue themselves. Working class people recognize that the system is fucked, and they're looking for a scapegoat. The Republicans provide that scapegoat in the form of trans people, immigrants, historically, women, black people, as well, other communities of color, really just marginalized people in general. Democrats don't provide a villain. They don't provide an enemy. They don't say that the billionaires are fucking you over because they're trying to get in bed with the billionaires. Healthcare. People are concerned about healthcare because the health insurance companies are fucking pimples on the ass of the United States of America. They're fucking terrible. There was a story that I read in the Lever about Blue Cross Blue Shield changing how they give out like inhalers and other life-saving medications for people. There was a story a couple months ago about someone dying because their health insurance company increased the price of their inhaler. Government spending, I think people are only concerned about government spending because they think it's overblown because Republicans love to talk about the fucking deficit, even though the GDP still outpaces all of the debt held by consumers and business owners, and that there are several trillions of dollars of debt held by the government in the form of like infrastructure projects, for example. While there's bipartisan concern about inflation, the parties are split on other issues. Anxiety about a recession and healthcare are the top issues for Democrats, while Republicans worry more about government spending and immigration. This also tracks on like Pew Research did a poll where they gathered all of the top issues for people heading into the election or shortly after. the election. And while Democrats did prioritize a couple more issues above the economy was number one for Republicans and in the top five for Democrats. People care about that shit. People care about shit that directly impacts them. Quote, as we moved from one administration to another and the Trump administration tries to find its footing, many still see our leaders as unresponsive to their main concerns, says Republican pollster Darren Shaw, who conducts Fox News surveys with Democrat Chris Anderson. Partisans have flipped, of course, so now it's Democrats who are most worried, but many independents and Republicans are also skeptical their economic fears are being addressed. It's because there isn't even the aesthetic of Donald Trump trying to do something. They're not even pretending to be fighting for economic issues. He's not like talking about anything substantive when it comes to lowering the cost of living. The only lip service he's providing is begging Jerome Powell to cut interest rates, which would unironically just make inflation worse. Nearly 3/4 believe tariffs will drive up the cost of products, including the majority of Democrats, 88%, Independents, 76%, and Republicans, 55%. This is just basic econ. I don't know how this isn't 100% of people. I mean, maybe if they polled like a baby who was registered to vote illegally, the baby would say no because they don't even have object permanence yet. Tariffs make things more expensive. If you don't believe that, you're just simply you are highly susceptible to propaganda. A record 55% think tariffs hurt the economy, and a plurality say they hurt U.S. jobs. 54% hurt versus 36% help. 2/3 worry a trade war with China could escalate into a military confrontation. I do not believe that. I don't believe that we're ever going to see a hot war between two superpowers ever again, especially considering that we all have nuclear weapons. China is very content to just like sit and do nothing. Like it's the meme, do nothing, win. On Doge efforts to reform the federal government, almost half say it's likely Doge will make government more efficient. 49% improve the economy, 47%, and improve government services, 46%, while fewer expected to lower their taxes. These people are just a little too optimistic, I would say. Doge is inherently an inefficient organization. They fired all the inspector generals responsible for auditing these agencies. There's also the office of what is it? The OMB is the office that's responsible for literally doing what Doge is doing. It's just more fucking redundancy. A slight majority, 52%, say the Trump administration has not been, quote, competent and effective in managing the federal government, unchanged from the number who said the same in 2017. You mean to tell me that the guy who bankrupted 6 companies, including a fucking casino, has no idea what the fuck he's doing? Federal district court judges have challenged some of Trump's administration's policies with regard to, among other things, firing executive branch workers and deporting illegal immigrants. Voters side with the judges as 58% think they are legitimately exercising their power in accordance with the Constitution system of checks and balances, while 33% say they are unlawfully interfering with the president's constitutional authority. We've seen this play out in Republican town halls across the country, specifically with Chuck Grassley, which I posted on YouTube, where his constituents were like, hey, what the, like, Donald Trump is acting like a fucking crazy person. The courts are doing everything they can. Why aren't you doing anything, Mr. Congressperson? 2/3 say the president cannot ignore court rulings, and voters are significantly more concerned by a 19-point margin about the president's disregarding the judiciary than about the courts overstepping their authority. I think I might be overstepping here, but there might be some people who recognize that it's more dangerous for Donald Trump to ignore the court than for the court to overstep, because the court doesn't have a legal enforcement mechanism for anything. It's just word. It's just vibes. It's like, bro, word is bond. Word is bond. That is effectively the judicial branch. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is the fucking commander in chief. If he ignores the court, he could say, what the fuck are you going to do about it? Get fucked, pussy. Among Republicans, 36% agree the judiciary is legitimately exercising its power, and a slim 51% majority say the president can't ignore rulings. If there's anything I know about like older Republicans, some of them might be MAGA, yeah, but some of them are also like very institutionalist in the same way that a lot of liberals are. They care about the aesthetics. They care about process. That's why they don't fuck with Donald Trump ignoring the court. Quote, while Trump may feel he's on favorable ground when arguing about immigration with Democrats, there are obvious risks to pushing too far, said Anderson. One risk is he is seen as doing it at the expense of economic issues which concern voters more than immigration. Another is in ignoring the courts and losing support to see value in checks and balances. Fewer voters are hoping for Trump's success in his second term. When asked to set aside how they voted, 62% say they want him to succeed, an 18-point drop from the 80% who expressed that sentiment 8 years ago. These people are like, fuck it. I just want it all to be bad so that way people recognize what they did. They're just being spiteful. And I very much understand where that's coming from, because as much as I do want Donald Trump to not destroy the United States of America, part of me like wants to see it happen. Part of me does really want things to get bad to see what the response would be. While support among Republicans holds steady, with more than 9 in 10 still wishing Trump well, the share of Democrats and independents who wanted to succeed has plummeted by 30 points or more since 2017. 89% of those who supported Trump in 2024 remain satisfied with their choice. That's down from 92% who felt that way 4 years ago and 97% 8 years ago. Overall, they are still satisfied with their vote for president, including 90% of Kamala Harris supporters. Poll Paris. Wow, what a fucking subheading. Investors are more likely than non-investors to improve of Trump's job performance on the economy, inflation, tariffs, and taxes as they rate economic conditions more positively both for the nation and their family. How? You have JP Morgan is like, dude, we are going towards a recession. Jamie Dimon is saying that the money molestation must stop. How do investors think this when literally like Scrooge McDuck himself is saying that Trump, his tariffs are bad for literally all of this? And while more investors are concerned about the stock market, a larger number of non-investors are worried about inflation and a recession this year. Yeah, because if you're a non-investor, that means you're a working class person. That means that the increased cost of living will directly take more fucking money out of your pocket. When your family members tell you to buy the dip on Trump's tariffs, and meanwhile you're working a, normal ass job making slightly above the minimum wage, like you have a mortgage, you have rent, you have bills, you have children, you have childcare. Like how the fuck are you going to buy the dip when you're already living paycheck to paycheck? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Anyone who says that to you is fucking privileged. They're privileged that they're sheltered from the reality that so many working class people exist in, that money is tight and shit is expensive, and that people don't make enough fucking money to provide for themselves. 42% approve of the job J.D. Vance is doing as vice president, while 51% disapprove. I wonder if this was before he killed the Pope. Because, hang on, let's check this. Pope Francis death. Pope Francis died on April 21st. This poll was conducted. This poll was conducted April 18th to April 21st. This very well could not include J.D. Vance killing the Pope, which I think would significantly tank his approval. For Elon's work with Doge, 39% approve and 56% disapprove. Nearly half of all voters had a favorable opinion of Trump as a person. Oh my God, dude, this is crazy. He is objectively a vile human being. He's racist. He's misogynistic. He was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He was going into fucking beauty pageants, into the dressing rooms of teenage beauty pageants. Like, even for people who are like, he's a Bible thumping Christian, he's got multiple baby mamas. Like, what are we doing? He's just a fucking gross person. Views of First Lady Melania Trump are positive by 6 points as I don't give a fuck about Melania. Who cares? 1/3 believe divine intervention helped secure Trump's return to the White House. Yeah, we're cooked. It's over. 33% of people think that Trump is a fucking monarch. It's over. We We deserve all of the bad things that are happening. 32% feel he was saved from assassination attempts because God wanted him to be president again, including the majorities of white evangelical Christians, Republicans, 2024 Trump supporters, and MAGA supporters. The percentages, respectively, 56, 60, 62, and 70. Dude, what the fuck? What the fuck, dude? These people are crazy. You straight up do not live in reality if you answer this question. Divine intervention? Are you fucking serious? This is even funnier. Okay, this poll is even funnier now because like this was a very biased Republican poll. Very biased. They're asking these fucking dumbass questions. And even still, Trump is not an overwhelmingly popular figure. By the way, this sample, 1,104 registered voters randomly selected from a voter, from national voter file. These are indisputable. This is indisputable. This sample size is good enough for me. If you have a sample size of more than 1,000 people, I'll take it. No grain of salt necessary. The view of Donald Trump in this country is very rapidly deteriorating. He is not going to be able to talk his way out of this second term. That much is clear.